You want them to come to Parliament to do what? To come and talk about the president, increasing the presidential term from 5 years to 7 years. It's uncalled for. And the Zambian people are not going to allow that.
What's up? My name is Ken Bimbo, the MC with the sauce. Don't forget to subscribe to JQ.
Good afternoon, members of the press and viewers and listeners and all citizens of this country that are following this press address that we are having this afternoon. My name is Gordon Mira, Member of Parliament from Kira Central Constituency under the Patriotic Front. At the same time, this week I'm serving as the Member of Parliament on duty to coordinate the activities of Parliament from the opposition inside the House. With me here, let me recognize the presence of the fellow members of Parliament that have gathered with me to address a very important issue that we have been confronted with, especially from Parliament proceedings of today. As many of you may be aware, those that have had access to the order paper, which is the agenda for business in the House, today we were discussing the report that came from a select committee that was appointed by the Speaker of the National Assembly, and that special committee was looking at that select committee was looking at the special audit that was conducted by the Office of the Auditor General on the external debt of the Republic of Zambia, covering the period from 2006 to 2022. So the report of the select committee came on the floor of the House today, and as per tradition, those members of Parliament ready to debate the report do indicate according to the provided guidelines. What happened on the floor of the House has been very disappointing, because we can simply say the debate on that report was curtailed. A lot of us wanted to contribute our input on that report on the floor of the House, but we saw the presiding officer curtail the debate. Many of us who wanted to talk in the House were simply told we are not going to talk, and the executive, the cabinet ministers were called upon to talk. So we were left with our views, we were left with our debate points to ourselves. And so we have chosen to have this platform so that what we should have spoken on the floor of the House regarding the report of the select committee, we are free to express our views about the contents of that report on this plan. Hence us having this address. Now let me go straight into that report. The select committee of Parliament was looking at the Auditor General reports on the special audit on the external debt from 2006 to 2022. And that report contains a lot of information. In fact, for me, first of all, I want to say it was a very good thing to have the external debt audited, because a lot of innuendos and aspersions have been cast on the previous government and the officers who served in the previous government, that the debt that this country contracted was simply pocketed and not applied for the intended purpose. But this special audit, first of all, was very good, that it had to put to rest all the speculations, the innuendos, the aspersions that some people were using to paint black the officers and simply the previous government. And also, the select committee did a very good job, because it interacted with controlling officers from government institutions and parastatals that were affected by that report. And the controlling officers appeared before the committee as quoted in the report, and they put things straight, contrary to many of the innuendos that have been spread. At this point also, as I delve into that report, let me also highlight that it was very disappointing, even as noted by the select committee in that report, that during the audit, during this special audit, government institutions that were approached, that the auditors went to did not provide adequate information to the auditors during the audit. Had they provided the information at the time the audit was taking place, more than half of the contents that we see in the Auditor General's report were going to be cleared and dropped. But there is a fair attitude, whether intentionally or unintentionally, the purpose we don't know, but officers who should have followed the law to provide audit information chose not to give that information. And so, as it were, the controlling officers, when they were now called to appear before the committee, put things straight, such that even the information that the Auditor General officials were not able to see or view and verify during the audit, that information was laid bare by the controlling officers that appeared before the committee. And this report also, I must say, it has left a bitter taste on the taste buds of many of the people, especially in the government, who thought that now what they have been talking about, squandering of the debt, is going to be exposed. But contrary to that, I'm sure to their disappointment, the report is very clear. Fellow analysts, the debt that the PF government contracted, because even if we are saying the report covered 2006 to 2022, you would find that almost 100% just covers the period that the PF was in government. It has talked about the 3 Eurobonds. It has talked about the debts that parastatals contracted, parastatals like ZESCO, Zamtel, the Development Bank of Zambia, the water utility companies, all those debts that these parastatals contracted at the guarantee of the government were covered. So simply this report has exonerated the performance of the PF as far as debt contraction and is concerned, because in that report, both the Select Committee report and the Auditor General's report, no names have been mentioned to be found culpable of misusing or mishandling the debt that was contracted. Let me just pick a few before my colleagues also come to their one. Let me just pick a few of the areas that are covered in that report. Let me start first of all with the Eurobonds. As we know, the Eurobonds were contracted at 3 different bonds. The first Eurobond was $750 million. The second one was $1 billion. The third one was $1.25 billion. The Auditor General's report has put it very clear where these bonds, these Eurobonds were applied. The first Eurobond, the institutions that benefited from that. The second Eurobond, the institutions that benefited. The third Eurobond. And in all this, the Auditor General's report, backed by the report of the Select Committee, it is very clear that those funds were applied for the intended purpose. Of course, there were some institutions which received part of these Eurobonds who have been highlighted in the report, like Zambia Railways, and it is not out of misapplication. It was administrative issues and contract management issues, such that, for example, in the case of Zambia Railways, the supplier who was supposed to deliver signaling and communication equipment failed to deliver. And that information is very clear. We come to DBZ. DBZ also benefited from the first Eurobond. And from there, there are, of course, operational issues where the companies or SMEs that were unlended using the Eurobond that was given to the Development Bank of Zambia failed to honor the loans that they got. Those operational issues that DBZ had been struggling even before the funding that came through the Eurobond. Other than those two institutions, the rest of the Eurobond in the first case was applied according to the plan, and all the other institutions, ZESCO, Lusaka Water, and everyone else, applied the funds and could be fulfilled in that report. So we are very comfortable that there was no misuse or misapplication of that. The second Eurobond, same thing. No institution, in fact, the second Eurobond and the third Eurobond, no institution that was funded has been found to misapply the funds. Of course, like I have stated, information that should have been provided by the government institutions that were being audited. They did provide that information at the time the Auditor General was there on 2 or 3 cases, but the controlling officers appeared before the committee and put the matter to rest. I can tell you, for example, the Auditor General's report says, part of the funds that were put in Control 99 were not explained, 100 million was not explained. But the controlling officer came and put the matter straight. When money goes as budget support in the Control 99, it is applied as part of the overall budget funding. I don't think you can be saying we bought stationery out of here, we paid salaries. It went into Control 99 and the controlling officer said there was no issue about that. There was an issue that some funds were spent without authority, without appropriation by Parliament. Again, the controlling officer appeared and put the matter straight that there was a supplemental budget that Parliament approved, and so there was no irregularities in spending part of the money. The other incident of the funding that went to settle the loan with Finance Bank, at the time of the audit, or the auditees, in their own wisdom or otherwise, chose not to provide information for which that $30 million was paid to the Finance Bank. But again, the controlling officer clarified and provided the documents to prove that there was indeed a loan between the government and Finance Bank. So all in all, there is no misapplication that we can find in that report. And I hope this puts matters to rest for the Zambians to know that when the debt was contracted, we are able to see the infrastructure, we are able to see the investment in energy, in electricity generation, we are able to see construction of universities, we are able to see the construction of infrastructure in the new districts that were declared during the 10-year period was in government. And I hope that this puts the matter to rest. Let me also talk about another issue that has even been very topical, the FTJ University in Luapuna. The report is very, very clear. But first of all, there was no irregularity in government making an advance payment of $33 million to the contractor, because that was counterpart funding, 15%, which the government was obliged to pay first before the financing could begin to flow. It was a normal contractual procedure to do that. Now, on this point also, I want to question the motive of the Auditor General in that report, because they finished that audit item with half-baked information, which was further clarified when the controlling officer appeared before the committee. When you read the Auditor General's report about the $3 million that was paid to the contractor and simply put that this money was wasted because the contract was terminated by December 2022 and funds were not recovered. But contrary to that audit finding, in the Select Committee's report, it is very clear the controlling officer here, first of all, put it clear there was no irregularity, and that money was not paid to any individual, any government institution. The advance payment was paid to the Chinese contractor who was contracted to construct the university. And if you care to understand contract management, that contract for the construction of the FTJ University was designed, mobilized, and built. Design is happening, those who understand architectural works. You design from the offices. And that advance payment obviously worked on the design, on the mobilization. But if someone just on design wants to go on site and see a structure standing, that just shows how ignorant they are in understanding contract management. If you go to the offices of the contractor, they will show you the drawing. They will show you the 3D drawing. But that is part of the design stage and the mobilization. Actual construction was going to start when the financing starts to come now from the main funder. So there was no irregularity. In fact, it has been happening now under this government that in March of this year, the Minister of Education sought guidance from the Attorney General. And the Attorney General gave guidance on the 6th of March 2024 to say they have the right, actually, it was regular for them to proceed and terminate the contract. So you have the auditor's report, which is saying the contract was terminated by the 1st December 2022. And the controlling officer appearing before the committee, the select committee, is saying, in fact, now is when the Minister of Education is in the process of terminating that contract and the advance payment will be recovered. So it never went to anyone's pocket, it went to the contractor, and guidance now has been given so that those funds could be recovered. So we went to see the Minister of Education do their part because the Attorney General have given their professional advice. Contrary to the numbers that have been spread about the 3 million, that it was pocketed, it was paid to some people, the findings in black and white in that report is that in fact those funds were released as part of the contract requirements, and now government has the right, as guided by the Attorney General, to recover that money because now the contract is going to be terminated. Far from the falsehood that the people in the government now have been spreading. I think the other item I can touch on is the funding, the $1.2 billion on the SUPA dollar bill corridor. Again, on this point, it is very clear what is contained in that report. In fact, that project did not even take off. But I just want to challenge this government because they instituted a special audit on the old debt. It is also good now to release what is the scope of the current works. SUPA dollar dual current way. What is the scope? What are we going to find when the contractor says they are done and ready to hand over? Then we compare with the scope of work that should have taken place when the 1.2 billion contract was being negotiated. Then that's the only fair way to the Zambians. Because we can't simply say, no, us we are doing it at half the price. But are you doing exactly what should have been done when it was quoted at 1.2 billion? The answer is no. The scope has been drastically reduced. And fellow Zambians, let's be fair with ourselves. Let's not use emotions when we are dealing with these things. Let's not have preconceived minds and answers that we must just get to this answer. Let us be logical and face the facts as they are, then we help ourselves. Let's look at the scope of the current contract that has been given. What is the contractor going to do? And we also BF released its scope when the pricing was at $1.2 billion. The scope was very clear. So even now, it is only fair that we see what is the scope of the current contract. In that way, we are then going to compare apples and apples, and not apples with oranges. I think that at this point, I can now hand over to my colleague so that he can also express himself, because he was also one of us who were curtailed to speak in the chamber. So here is the platform now so that he can also contribute his ideas on the audit. I can.
I know that because of my cough, I won't be able to speak, but you raised a very important point that I thought I could just address. Yes, countrymen and women, the issue of the dollar dual carriageway is very, very important, and the MP on duty also raised the issue of FTJ. These two have been extensively discussed and they've drawn public interest. So what is important to note is that the two contracts must be compared line by line. Like the MP said, when you're comparing contracts, you strictly have to look at the design. You also have to look at the scope. It may be 340 kilometers either ways, but the details in the design is what will determine what the cost will be. Number two, it's very clear that in the initial contract, the repayment period for the 1.2 billion was within 15 years. The project was supposed to be handed over after 3 years, after which government had 15 years to repay. In the current amendment, you have $650 million as a contract sum, but the contractor takes over the collection of tolls for the next 25 years. Underscore that. That is very important. So in terms of costing, the foregone revenue is part of the cost. And I want to repeat that. The revenue that we forego on those tolls is part of the cost. So it's $650 million plus the foregone revenue. Those that have done calculations will tell you that the amount is coming to $3 billion thereabout. So if you're going to compare $1.2 billion to $3 billion, you certainly will arrive at the same conclusion to say, away from the propaganda that these people try to put up, the deal of the dollar dual carriageway now is actually a very bad deal for this country. If you look at the life of the road, what life will be left after 25 years? Most likely, at the time they'll be handing over the tolls, we immediately have to spend some more money in maintenance going forward. That is very important. The next point on the FTJ, there was a lot of drama. Even the ministers who are supposed to know what transpired on the FTJ University were raising innuendos. They were going around spreading rumors. I want to thank government and Parliament to have instituted this particular audit. The intentions were ill. It was ill-intended. But luckily, the witnesses who went to submit to that particular report have vindicated the previous government. On the FTJ University, when you have to understand contract management, people needed to understand what is the nature of this contract. That contract was designed and built, meaning the contractor came in with a design. There was a cost for the design, and there was a cost for that construction. There was also a cost, there are what you call general provisions, items, like mobilization. So it was not enough to get excited that 30 million was paid. You needed to know for what was that amount paid. So when the witnesses appeared before the committee, Attorney General and Secretary of the Treasury, they all said there was nothing irregular about those payments. They were part of the contract. And as a matter of fact, the contract, everywhere when you're doing construction contracts, these are best practices. They provide for advance payments. Now, government is never exposed when they're giving out advance payments, because in exchange for the advance payment, government gets bonds and bank guarantees. Meaning, at the time that the government feels they're about to lose that money, they simply cash the bond. They simply cash the guarantee. So there's no issue. Yeah. So it was very important that we clarify these things, because we were bordering on the diplomatic issues. Remember that both contractors, both in the dual carriageway and the FTJ, were Chinese companies. These are companies owned by the Chinese government. They're not mere companies. They were companies owned by the Chinese government. So if somebody was alleging corruption on the part of China Jiangxi, they were ideally saying the Chinese government company was involved in corruption. So this we feared was going to further deepen our challenges that we've had with the Chinese government. So it was important for us as opposition MPs to put this straight through the report. The report is very clear, including the FTJ University, because we are alleging that the Chinese company was involved in corruption. The report clearly points out that this money was paid to the contractor and not to any of the PF officials. So, Chair, I just thought that was a comment. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for recognizing the presence of our bona fide leader of opposition and the other members of parliament. Just to add on to the special auditory report, the report covers the external debt of about 13 billion. However, what is so shocking is that the report focuses so much on a company owned by a Zambian called Mikalile Trading. Under what is called the Credit Supplier Agreement, the Zambian government entered into an agreement with Mikalile Trading of Hong Kong to supply things to the Ministry of Education various stuff ranging from computers and other things. The Zambian government is owing Mikalile about $495 million US. Otherwise, instead of paying, government was supposed to start paying in 2021, but instead of paying, government decided to sanction a special audit report in order to have an opportunity to smear Mikalile with all manner of black stuff. What the public might be interested in to know is the fact that when Mikalile was called to go and give their side of the story, they actually produced even delivery notes for all the goods that they delivered to the Ministry of Education. Remember, the committee that sat aired their proceedings on Parliament and Parliament Radio and Parliament TV. So we are all aware that Mikalile actually produced even their delivery notes of the goods that they supplied to the Ministry of Education. One thing that should also be of interest is the fact that it's the only private company that has been audited by the Auditor General. The Auditor General does not audit private firms, they audit government institutions. But in this case, they audited even Mikalile Trading of Hong Kong. And this is at a time when government is claiming to have restructured the debt. This debt they have not restructured it, and instead they are fighting to ensure that they do not pay. But of what came out of that committee report is the fact that the liability holder is not Mikalile itself, it's HBC Bank of China, which means that this bank can actually even sue government, and government will lose a lot in terms of money if that bank decided to sue. This has been heavily tackled by my colleague, the MP on duty. Then we also touch on the issue of the proposed through a proxy. The UPND through a proxy, they are calling on the extension of the presidential term from 5 years to 7 years. And what is worrying the Zambian people out there is the fact that if one has failed in 5 years, how will they manage in 7 years? And this is happening at a time when the Zambian people are even saying 2026 is way too far. They want the term to be reduced so that they could have an opportunity to remove the UPND from government through a ballot. And we are aware that the UPND government has been told by their ears on the ground that even if they hired 24 Sambomans, they would not win the 2026 general elections. And now they have resorted to the mutilation of the Constitution of Zambia. They have been told that they can't win. All those mining firms or private companies aligned to them are in panic mode. And they are releasing money to ensure that at least they salvage the situation. But this is way too late. Because the pain and anguish of the hunger that these people have subjected the Zambian people to is what has made the Zambian people to decide to change government in 2026. We are also aware that they have bought some students who are parading themselves and are ready to be bought, have been bought to come and petition Parliament. These are students who should be advocating for their colleagues at Levi Mwanawasa University to be put on the bursary. These are students who should be advocating for Liver One to be put on the bursary. These are students who should be advocating for their colleagues for NIPA to be put on the bursary. But they have hired themselves out there to the UPND. We want to remind those students that in case they are not aware, the Zambian people are very angry with the UPND government to an extent where everyone, whoever associates themselves with the UPND, the Zambian people are not seeing them in good light. In that case, we are also aware that the people are contemplating of coming to parliament on the day that those students will come to parliament to protest. And we want to remind the Zambian police to say just a few weeks ago, you stopped youths from protesting against ZESCO. What has changed? What has changed today? Those board students, you want them to come to parliament to do what? To come and talk about the president, increasing the presidential term from 5 years to 7 years. It's uncalled for. And the Zambian people are not going to allow that. Let me also remind the proponents of the constitutional amendments, whether contentious or not contentious, the Zambian people are not going to allow any mutilation of the constitution. And the other thing is that on the same issue of the mutilation of the constitution, in our case as opposition members of parliament, we are not going to allow the removal of the 50% plus 1 or any mutilation of the constitution, whether contentious or non-contentious. What we want is for us to go to the polls using this same constitution, as we are very comfortable with it, because we know the people on our side. We are very comfortable with the 50% plus 1. Why are they scared? They won with a bigger margin in 2021. Where have their support gone just yesterday? In our case, we want to go to the next polls with the 50% plus 1 embedded in our constitution, because we know the Zambian people want us big time. Every Zambian today wants the Patriot Front, but under the able leadership of His Excellency Dr. Edgar Chabalongi. Suffice to say, I want to call on the youth to provide their own voice against the injustices, against the expulsion of members of parliament, because this expulsion of members of parliament, even the 9 members of parliament, is all about the mutilation of the constitution. They want to have a lot of numbers on their side, so that even if they decided to remove the Christian nation clause or article, they will have it easy, because they would have won various by-elections using underhand methods. But we want to appeal to the Zambian people to say no to any maneuvers to mutilate the constitution. It's about the constitution that we're having these expulsions, the declaration of seats vacancies, because they want to mutilate the constitution. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Allow me to recognize our leader of opposition. Parliament here. Like he indicated, on the floor of the House, we had a debate that we need to unite as the chairman of the leaders amended. Were the 2 documents that we are looking at, the audit report and the committee's report. The audit report has got 86 pages, and the institution which was being audited was the Ministry of Finance. But if you look at 3/4 of the audit report, you see that all the revenue supply who is being like mentioned. And what came out prominently was lack of documentation when they were conducting the audit. But when the Secretary to Cabinet appeared, Secretary General appeared before the committee, he indicated that all the documentations were provided. And he complained bitterly, because he was shocked. This was a 9 issue where all documentations are provided. Then they still continue mentioning that all documentation was provided for. Then again, the Attorney General appeared before the committee was also questioned about the procedure. If the procedure in awarding the contract and other related issues were followed, and he submitted that everything was followed to the letter, and all the government lawyers cleared the issue. Now, if all these issues were done, then why are these audit queries being brought about? What is the motive behind it? These are serious questions that the executive need to answer. The public needs to know what is the issue. If you go even on the committee, this issue was subjected before the committee. If you look at the recommendation of the committee, they are saying this is Zambia offered a service to the Zambia, to us, to the nation. He needs to be paid. That is how they have concluded. Propaganda. Calling each other thieves when people have not stolen will not help. If someone says, what happened, the audit which was happening was more like an investigation. So, the investigation now, the revelation from the investigation is saying, there is nothing, there is no problem. My colleagues have highlighted a lot of issues. For example, the Zambian one, who wanted $1 billion. They were given $920 million. If the issue has been looked into, the consideration has been done, money was used properly. I think only $3 million. One supplier is not supplying goods.
Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, J Cool, and turn on the notification bell, cause I'm gonna see you in the next video.